Good morning. Welcome to the Legislative Budget Conference Committee. We wanted to just start with a roll call vote. Madam Secretary.
Assemblymember Ting.
Here.
Senator Leno.
Here.
Senator Bates. Assemblymember Bloom. Assemblymember Gonzalez.
Present.
Senator Hancock. Senator Lara. Senator Nielsen. Assemblymember Obernolte.
Here.
Assemblymember Olson.
Here.
Mr. Bloom.
The quorum is present.
Thank you. Well, we are very excited to begin our conference committee. The Assembly has passed out our version of the budget. We are excited about supporting the governor's proposal around the $2 billion rainy day fund. But while we are making sure that we have a fiscally responsible budget for the long term, we know that it's been raining on many of the most Californians who are most in need. And at a time that is very dire, we also wanted to ensure that we are properly funding our social services for people that really need it, whether they're homeless, whether they're foster children, whether they're in need of health care. Some of the various proposals that we'll be discussing over the next number of days will be around early childhood education, will be around college readiness, housing and homelessness, as well as our local jail proposal, and infrastructure and deferred maintenance. And obviously, a lot of attention that we'll be focusing on this morning will be around education. But while we do have three different versions of the budget, as you all have seen, the differences aren't that great, and we'll be looking forward over the next couple of days to really fine-tuning a lot of the issues within the budget. And with that, I'd like to turn over to Senator Leno for any opening comments.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to ride shotgun to Chair Ting's maiden voyage through the conference committee process, and to say that we're very fortunate that California is experiencing the financial strength that it is currently. So, of course, taking heed to the governor's wise advice that the next downturn is certainly up ahead. We don't know when. We don't need to speak of it. But it is a reality that we must deal with. At the same time, California's economy is growing 6 times faster, our GDP, than the national at about 3%. We created a full 35% of all new jobs nationwide here in California in the month of April. So indicators are still strong. I think all three agree that we need to continue to put monies aside, not only through the voter-mandated Proposition 2 Rainy Day Fund, but also into our special fund for economic uncertainty, while we at the same time address the very real and serious unmet needs of so many Californians whose boats have not been lifted by this current high tide, and that we recognize our responsibility is for them as well. So with that, look forward to our debates and final resolution, because we will have a balanced budget passed by the legislature by June 15th.
Thank you, Senator. I wanted to allow the Assembly Budget Vice Chair, Mr. Obernolte, a chance to speak as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very excited to be serving on this committee with you, especially so because there is so much in these budgets that's worthy of support. I think in particular, it's very gratifying that we are spending a substantial increased investment in education at all levels of the state of California, all the way from pre-K through our university system. I think that's very appropriate. Also, it's very gratifying to see all three budgets commit to substantial increases in the state's reserve. However, I think it needs to be said that even with these increases, the Department of Finance is projecting a $4 billion deficit by fiscal year 2019-2020. And that's without the higher levels of spending in the Assembly and the Senate budgets being taken into account, and it's also without the possibility of any economic downturn. So I'm looking forward through the committee process to searching for ways to avoid that from happening. That said, I'm looking forward to serving with you over the next couple of weeks.
At this time, I want to allow Ms. Costa from Finance, see if she had any opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. Amy Costa with the Department of Finance. I would note the administration continues to caution against creating ongoing costs. We've talked often about remaining focused on paying down our debts and liabilities and limiting any significant ongoing costs. Although our estimates do have an underpinning of growth, we have seen that our recovery has slowed. We must continue to be prudent and prepare for the next recession. Although many of the proposals that were funded by the legislature are laudable, we continue to be precariously balanced in the short term. And as noted, we are projecting out-year budget deficits in both 2018-19 and 19-20. We don't know what voters will decide on the Proposition 30 extension, and in the absence of that information, we want to ensure we can support some of the programs we have more recently funded, including the minimum wage increase. The administration does appreciate that both houses included reserve funds, and we continue to think it will be vital to help weather future recessions. We'd note that putting the reserve funds in the rainy day fund is a critical piece to saving funds to ensure that they are there when they are needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Costa. And with that, we are going to start with our issue number 1, which is education. The first issue is the overview of Prop 98 funding. Ms. Costa, did you want to start with that?
Mr. Chair, I believe the analyst will actually provide the overview on this item.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Capon.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chair and members. Kenneth Capon with the Analyst's Office. Your education agenda has a number of issues for discussion. I'll set the stage with a brief overview of the Proposition 98 spending plan adopted by each House. So turning to page 3 of your conference agendas, as you know, the May revision included total Proposition 98 funding of $67.2 billion in 2014-15, $69.1 billion in 2015-16, and $71.9 billion in 2016-17. During budget discussions, both houses adopted spending plans based on LAO local property tax estimates. Compared with the administration, those estimates are $432 million above the administration across the 3-year period. Using our higher property tax revenue estimates has 2 effects. First, it increases Proposition 98 funding by $54 million, and second, it frees up about $380 million for non-Proposition 98 programs. Both houses also adjusted or rebenched the minimum guarantee for the Proposition 47 savings allocated to dropout and truancy prevention programs. That adjustment increases the minimum guarantee by an additional $10 million beginning in 2016-17. So between the property tax estimates and the Proposition 47 adjustment, total Proposition 98 funding is $65 million above the administration's estimates. On page 4 of your agenda, we show the amount of Proposition 98 funding provided from the State General Fund and from local property tax revenue for each fiscal year. Turning to page 5 of your agenda, we compare the amount of Proposition 98 funding allocated to each segment under the packages adopted by each House. In relative terms, those differences are not very large. We're talking about just a few $100 million on a Proposition 98 budget of more than $70 billion. In 2015-16, the Assembly plan allocates $213 million more for preschool and $213 million less for K-12 compared with the Senate plan. In 2016-17, the Assembly plan allocates $35 million less for preschool and $35 million more for K-12 schools compared with the Senate plan. All 3 plans have similar amounts set aside for community colleges. Turning to page 6 of your agenda, the largest component of the plans adopted by each House is an augmentation to continue the implementation of the local control funding formula. The administration's plan had included $3 billion for the formula. The Assembly plan provides $5 million less than that amount, and the Senate provides $31 million more. All 3 plans would bring the local control funding formula to approximately 96% of its target level. In addition, all 3 plans prioritize the K-14 mandate backlog. As we show on page 7 of your agenda, the administration's plan provided $1.5 billion to reduce the backlog. The Assembly plan provided $1.4 billion, and the Senate plan provided $1.3 billion. This funding would provide all schools and community colleges with funding they could use for any local purpose based on the number of students they serve. Turning to page 8 of your agenda, we estimate how much of the backlog would remain after making those mandate payments. We estimate the administration's plan would reduce the backlog to approximately $1.2 billion, whereas the Assembly and Senate plans each would reduce the backlog to approximately $1.3 billion. Finally, turning to page 9, we have a breakdown of the major programmatic differences between the Houses and the administration. This table, you'll notice, only focuses on K-12 issues, which make up the bulk of your agenda for the next few items. I'll just point out a few key features of the differences. The Assembly plan included $73 million to increase funding for after-school programs, $20 million to help classified employees earn their teaching credentials, and $20 million to increase the funding allocated for truancy prevention programs. Some key components of the Senate plan included $200 million for a college readiness block grant, $60 million to support teacher residency programs, and $45 million to assist schools with the state's new accountability rubrics. Those proposals, I think, are all going to be covered in more detail later in your agenda. I think that concludes our overview. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Ms. Costa, did you have any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just add some more high-level comments, and then we'll get into the bulk of the agenda. The administration's Prop 98 package is premised on several important factors, some of which mirror what I just said in the opening comment as the overall budget. One of our key emphasis is ensuring that both K-12 schools and community colleges have flexible funding that they can utilize to best serve the unique students of their districts. To this end, we invest in LCFF and base apportionment and limit and confine spending in other targeted areas. Given this reality, our Prop 98 limits committing additional dollars to new programs and emphasizes one-time dollars for one-time efforts.
Thank you. Any questions from the members? Okay, no questions. We're moving on to issue number 2, early childhood education. We'll start with Ms. Early from the LAO.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Virginia Early, Legislative Analyst Office. So today I'm going to walk you through the Assembly and the Senate package and discuss some options with you to consider in putting together the Conference Child Care and Preschool package. And this starts on page 12 of the agenda. But before I go through the agenda, I just want to provide some brief high-level background on the child care and preschool system. California's child care and preschool programs primarily serve low-income working families, with the exception of the transitional kindergarten program, which serves children born in certain months of the year. There are three mechanisms for this system. The first, the programs provide child care through vouchers, and this is the CalWORKS and the Alternative Payment Program. The state also provides child care and preschool through direct contracts with service providers through the General Child Care and State Preschool Program. And finally, school districts provide transitional kindergarten alongside their other K-12 programs. Each mechanism has its own reimbursement rate structure, and we'll be talking more about these later. So vouchers get reimbursed based on the regional market rate, which has 72 different rates in each county and is based on market surveys of prices for childcare based on age and so forth. Contract-based childcare is reimbursed based on the standard reimbursement rate, which is the same statewide. And then transitional kindergarten is reimbursed through LCFF. So in terms of the overall plans, the governor would provide $3.6 billion for child care and development programs as part of the May revision. The Assembly plan would increase spending by $619 million, and the Senate plan would increase spending by $101 million. And in terms of year-to-year increases, the governor would increase in the May revision by about 2% from the prior year. The Assembly plan would increase by about 19% from the prior year. And by prior year, I mean 15-16. And the Senate plan would increase by 4% from 15-16. So moving on to page 13 of the handout, of the agenda, we lay out some commonalities between the Assembly and the Senate plans. For example, both houses raised the regional market rate for vouchers to align with the most recent market data. They just provide different levels, families different levels of access to the market, because the regional market rate is designed so that the rates get set at a certain percentage, and that percentage means that the family's voucher should be good for that percentage of the slots in their community. Both houses also raise reimbursement rates for providers contracting with the state, increase slots, and create an apprenticeship program for child care workers. However, the Assembly plan contains higher rate increases, spends more on quality improvement activities, funds additional preschool slots, and expands income eligibility. So page 14 of your agenda provides a bit of a deeper dive into the differences between the houses, and I'll walk through some of these. So as you can see on the rates, the Assembly is providing $444 million to increase this SRR for contracts by 15%, so just the flat rate across the state by 15%, and increase the regional market rate for vouchers to the 80th percentile of the 2014 survey. So as I mentioned before, this means that every family across the state would have access to 80% of the slots in their area. And it would increase the license exempt rate for those slots as well. The Senate plan would increase the SRR by 4% and the regional market rate by 75%. So similar types of increases, different numbers. In terms of slots, the Assembly plan would add 10,000 state preschool slots and 6,000 alternative payment slots, while the Senate plan would add 2,000 alternative payment slots. And I should point out that the various plans have various different start dates. I'm not going to go into that now, but if you want to delve into that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. In terms of eligibility, the Assembly increases income eligibility to 85% of the state median income. That means that whereas the current eligibility threshold is set at 70% of the 2007 state median income. The Assembly plan also provides various one-time and ongoing quality funding increases, including $25 million ongoing for state preschool QRS and the apprenticeship program I mentioned earlier. And as I mentioned, the Senate plan includes this apprenticeship program. And finally, the Assembly plan includes three major language changes. The first would direct the Department of Education to develop a differentiated funding rate for part and full day kindergarten and transitional kindergarten to use beginning in 2018-19. Secondly, it would direct CDE to amend its quality improvement spending plan to prioritize funds for the quality rating and improvement system. And finally, it would require CDE to allocate $317,000 of its already existing quality funds to develop a plan for providing 1 year of preschool to all 4-year-olds in the state. So on page 15 of the agenda, I'll start walking through some of the considerations for you as you develop your conference child care and preschool plan. I'm not going to go into considerations around the language changes I just mentioned. If you'd like to talk about those in more detail, I'm happy to do so. So in terms of reimbursement rates, currently the child care reimbursement rates are not aligned with the current market survey. And because of that, similar families in different parts of the state actually have different levels of access to the market. So for example, some infants who have vouchers who are seeking center-based care might have access to, say, 70% of the slots in their area, while a similar family might have access to a different amount of this percent of the slots in their area. And that's just because of various changes that have happened over the years. So if the legislature could update the voucher rates based on the most recent child care market survey, and that would remedy this problem. And the legislature could provide comparable rate increases to voucher-based and contract-based child care. For example, if one change to the regional market rate would increase those programs by 5%, the legislature could provide a 5% increase to the standard reimbursement rate. In terms of slots, there are currently many children in California that are eligible for subsidized child care and preschool but do not receive it. And additionally, the slots that do exist are distributed inequitably across the state, with some counties serving higher percentages of eligible children than others. So the legislature could take an opportunity to increase the slots to serve a higher number of eligible children, and also take the opportunity to use those additional slots to equalize service levels across the state. So page 16 shows of your agenda shows two different charts, and I'm going to walk you through these kind of slowly so you understand what they're doing. The first chart at the top is really, we're really trying to just provide some different costing out options for you. So the first chart shows the cost. The $49 million is the cost to increase the regional market rate to the 75th percentile of the 2014 survey beginning October 1. And all the dates for the regional market rates, a slot and a rate increases here that we have in this first chart start October 1. So they're not full year costs. And the reason we did that is to allow time for CDE and for the alternative payment agencies who implement these rate changes to get ready to do so. And so, for example, increasing the regional market rate to the 80th percentile of the 2014 survey would cost $113 million at that October 1 start date. And to add 2,000 alternative payment slots, again, starting October 1st at those higher rates would cost $14 million. So, and if you wanted to add 6,000 slots at the 75th percentile of the 2014 survey, you would just multiply 13 by 3. So this is set up so you can kind of do some math if you like. So the second chart at the bottom shows comparable increases to the standard reimbursement rate. So as I mentioned earlier, the legislature could choose to update the standard reimbursement rate by the same percentage it chose to update the regional market rate. And so the percentages that are highlighted in this chart below are just the comparable percentages to the increases highlighted in the chart below. So for example, if you increase the regional market rate to the 80th percentile of the 2014 survey, that's roughly comparable to increasing the voucher programs by 11%, which is why we've depicted 11% SRR increase in the chart on the bottom. So here, this chart is built the same way. The rates are starting for the full year because that's the way that CDE can do them. But the slots are half year costs because, again, that's the way CDE can do them. And so, for example, that just works the same way. If you want to increase the standard reimbursement rate by 5%, that would be a cost of $67 million. And if you wanted to add 2,000 full-day state preschool slots starting in January, that would cost, I'm sorry, I meant to say $67 million. That would cost $10 million for the full-day state preschool slots. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the options that you have in front of you, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Early. Ms. Costa.
Thank you. Yes, the administration does not support either version of the early childhood education packet or the child care packet, with the exception of we do support the Assembly version of the child care quality expenditure plans, which was based on our proposal. I think within each of these programs for the early childhood education, the administration's desire is to align those programs better with LCFF. And to wrap those into the broader funding mechanism we've created for K-12 schools in the state. With child care, we've had many conversations since the release of the budget. And again, the administration's desire was to help reduce some of the complexities of that particular system.
Thank you. Any questions from members? Senator Hancock.
I think the system is extremely complex. Even the terminology, center-based versus home-based, voucher versus contract, things get used interchangeably in ways that can be very confusing. I wondered if the LAO had a suggested solution to simplifying, and then we have to look at the two major issues, which are what are the rates, are they adequate, and are the number of slots adequate? And I don't know that the administration actually addressed that issue.
So in January, we did recommend to the legislature that legislature consider moving all the child care programs into one single system instead of having them separated between the contract and the voucher system, and slowly migrating into a voucher-based system that would allow all families the same level of choice, but then modifying that system so to ensure that all families have the same level of quality. So we recommended at that time that the legislature ask CDE to develop developmentally appropriate regulations for children for programs serving birth through 3 to ensure that they have some sort of developmental activities in those centers.
Okay. And did the administration, or is that what you're interested in as well?
Jessica Holmes, Department of Finance. We agree that moving towards a single system would certainly be less complex and would allow us to address some of the inequities that are inherent in our existing system. As to your first question regarding, the question of whether or not we should increase rates and whether or not slots are adequate or not, I think one of the things that we're most concerned about is the feedback that we get from folks in the field and advocates about the instability of child care funding over the last several years. And our concern moving into the future is creating ongoing cost obligations in the child care program that may not be sustainable over time. And so when we're looking at things like adding additional funding, we look at that in a very moderate way because of our concerns that ongoing funding may not be sustainable.
Well, if we consider that women are going to be working into the foreseeable future, and men are too, how does the administration look at an investment that would allow us to adequately care for the children so we don't have further investments later on in life when we may have problems because of inadequate early care?
Again, I think to pivot off my colleague's, Ms. Holmes' point, I think our concern is, and you'll see this actually throughout my comments regarding some of the proposals, is that we are projecting out-year budget deficits. In the absence of a Prop 30 extension, we are very cautious about including additional funding in programs without cutting other programs because inevitably when a recession occurs, and we are 2 years outside of the historic expansion of the state economy, these are difficult decisions to make. And so, as Ms. Holmes said, we try to be moderate, and that's what you see reflected in our child care proposal.
Okay. It's our understanding there are about 200,000 unmet needs among our young children, and I wondered if the LAO could comment on that. It's been said there's between 20,000 and 200,000, but I thought yesterday we learned in committee that it might be as many as 220,000.
This is Edgar Cabral with the Legislative Analyst Office. We don't have a specific estimate of the total unmet need. I think there are some key assumptions that can have significant effects on the estimates. We have heard some numbers that are in that neighborhood. I think mostly what we do know based on child care eligibility, that we do know no matter which of the different assumptions we've used, that most eligible or children who we think would be eligible for receiving child care do not do so at this moment. Part of it may be that there isn't space for them in the child care programs, and in some cases we do know that there are, for example, families who are receiving CalWORKs where they choose not to receive subsidized care. So it's something that we don't have a specific number on, but we do think that it's fair to say that most children who we think would be eligible under the requirements of the program are not being served.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Assemblymember Gonzalez.
So I have a question, and it goes along those lines. So we have a CalWORKs program that encourages welfare to work, and we've decided as a nation that's important. The biggest barrier to women reentering the workforce, of course, is affordable, accessible child care. So at what point do we believe people can become self-sufficient if we're not committed to the single most important facet of getting women back to work?
So I think that's something that I think as part of these discussions we think are part of the legislature. We don't have a specific estimate or recommendation on what level the legislature should spend in this budget. We try to provide some information to give you a sense of what those costs are. But we do think that given what we know, we do think that there are a substantial portion of children who are not being served right now, or eligible children who are not being served.
I would just note that currently any recipient or former recipient of CalWORKs is guaranteed child care as part of the stage 1, 2, and 3 CalWORKs child care programs.
And then, okay, with the expansion of the minimum wage, though, do we have numbers on the eligibility and who's dropping out now or is no longer eligible for the subsidized child care program once, in fact, they are working at a minimum wage job?
So unfortunately, we do know the percentage of children that the state projects would leave each year. Unfortunately, we don't leave CalWORK specifically. Unfortunately, we don't have numbers and a breakdown for how many of those families are leaving because they're incoming out of the program, because their kid is aging out of the program, because they're moving away. So unfortunately, we don't have that information to give you.
So we don't know what the increase in the minimum wage will do as far as eligibility for existing families or as women, and I know men too, but for the most part, women who are re-entering or entering the workforce, if they in fact will be eligible for the subsidized care.
So I can say that for a single parent family that is working full-time, currently they're still eligible for childcare, and they would continue to be eligible for childcare under our existing threshold once the minimum wage increase is fully implemented. The issue is more for two-parent families and for single parents that perhaps don't earn minimum wage, but whose wages might increase as a result of changes in the minimum wage.
And we have no numbers on how many that would be?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, and as affected both by minimum wage and just generally the economy, are childcare rates keeping pace with the economy? Or have they?
So our reimbursement rates for the voucher system, which is the one that's has been historically tied to the market, are not based off of current market data. So our rates are currently set at 104%, 104.5% of the greater of the 2005 market survey data or the 2009 market survey data deficited by a certain amount. And so we've increased them by 4.5% last year, flat across the board, so that did some, but they're not tied to the most recent market data. That being said, the legislature could decide what percentile of the most recent data it wanted to fund based on the resources it has available.
And with the increase in the minimum wage and reimbursement rates, do we know how that'll affect centers and keeping centers open?
So as the surveys continue to get done, so the state is required to have a survey done every 2 years, and so as the surveys are done over time, the changes in the market that result from the changes in minimum wage will be included in the surveys. So if the legislature continues to update to the most recent survey, that problem will be solved.
So the surveys are done, we just don't adjust to them?
Correct.
And when's the last time we adjusted to the survey?
We added the 2009 survey to the mix in 14-15.
So we have how many years of gap? I'm sorry, it's just, this has been a very complex issue for us to get our arms around in Women's Caucus, but seems absurd that we're doing a survey every 2 years and we're going to rely on that survey to see if we need to make adjustments, but we realize we haven't made any adjustments for the last, 5-6 years?
The legislature has added funds to the rates in both 14-15 and 15-16. They just have not chosen
the 2009 rate.
Mm-hmm, correct. Plus the 4.5% increase on top of that.
So this is more to, I guess, Department of Finance. Like, what is our foreseeable future, assuming a recession and that people actually need subsidized child care more? How do we provide what could be, and I think probably will be, declining spots at a time when we need them most and we need people working the most?